If you enjoy what you hear here today, please consider supporting me on my Patreon page. Every dollar helps, and you get to see content that you won't see here. Chapter 8. Questions.
Do I have to be there for this?
Rainbow grunted irritably, looking up at Celestia with eyes begging for mercy.
Yes, Rainbow Dash. You are the, shall we say, victim of Blueblood's rude behavior, so it is only prudent that you are present for a part of this discussion.
Celestia answered with a nod. She clearly didn't like bringing Rainbow along for this little trip. The filly had been through enough already. Rainbow scoffed and looked away to examine the houses as they trot by them on the street. Commoner ponies were making sure the two royals had their space. Many of them were giving respectful bows of their heads along the way. Celestia barely paid them any mind, but Rainbow was starting to shrink slightly.
We're almost there, Rainbow,
Celestia assured her softly, patting her gently with an extended wing before slightly increasing her pace.
Which house is it?
Rainbow asked while scanning the street ahead of them, squinting in an effort to discern Canterlot architecture from more Canterlot architecture.
The 4-story building, just there. See? It has the equestrian flag blowing in the... Rainbow Dash?
Celestia asked before noticing that Rainbow had vanished. She looked around and then sighed in exasperation, but also amusement, when she spotted Rainbow coming to a swift landing in the front yard of Highblood's estate. A couple of the ponies stationed out in front as the family's personal guards came close to having heart attacks from the sudden appearance of the newly revealed royal, especially considering Cadance's message earlier. Picking up the pace, Celestia cantered past the ornate fence separating the estate's grounds from the rest of the street.
Some pony eager?
She asked Rainbow with a small smirk.
To get this over with and go home? Yeah, I am.
Rainbow shot back before looking to the tall building before them. Her nose twitched slightly. Celestia chuckled before turning her attention to the two ponies nearby, who both still looked rather pale.
At ease, gentle colts. I assume Highblood and Blueblood are waiting for us inside.
One of the guards cleared his throat and stood up straight. Yes, Your Highness. Well, Highblood awaits you in his office. Blueblood is, not.
Where might he be?
Celestia asked with a raised eyebrow. The guard shifted uneasily. Janitor work, Your Highness. Highblood saw fit to start his son's punishment early, I think. Rainbow grinned widely.
Yeah!
Celestia frowned, mostly at Rainbow's enthusiastic response. She put a hoof atop Rainbow's head to get her attention before looking back to the guards.
Thank you. Resume your duties. I know the way.
Believe me, Your Majesty, I know. The guard replied before giving a deep bow. He took up his position once more as Celestia and Rainbow entered the estate. Rainbow looked up and blinked in surprise before squinting.
Okay, whose idea was it to put up a chandelier of those things? They're reflecting more colors than I do.
Fire opals, Dash. The chandelier is made up of fire opals, and it was put into place by Highblood's grandfather. He had a certain passion for the gem,
Celestia answered, looking around the large central lobby with a neutral expression.
It hurts my eyes,
Rainbow snorted.
Yours and mine both. But come, let's not keep the prince waiting.
Celestia agreed while starting for the stairs in the back of the room. Rainbow followed, noting the deep blue carpet that led from the entrance to the stairs. The whole estate followed some very consistent color schemes, it seemed. Deep, dark blues made up much of the floor, along with patterns of white and some black and to fill in the rest. The walls were white, albeit faded somewhat from age, while the trimmings were of a richly colored and well-maintained wood. Even if she could always be partial to the old architecture and styles of Cloudsdale, she did have to admit this estate wasn't exactly hard on the eyes. At the end of one of the hallways on the second floor, Celestia came to a stop before a somewhat more decorated wooden door. She paused and put a hoof on Rainbow's back to stop her for a moment. Dash looked up with a curious tilt of her head.
What's up?
Wait here, please. I wish to speak with High Blood in private for a moment.
Celestia replied before knocking on the door.
Come in,
came the response of an older stallion. Celestia opened the door and stepped inside. She turned to Rainbow and smiled.
I'll be only a few minutes. I'll call you in when we're ready.
Sure.
Rainbow replied casually, waving her hoof at Celestia.
Go ahead. I'll be here.
Celestia nodded with an appreciative smile before closing the door. From where she stood, Rainbow Dash could just make out the muffled voices of the two speaking to one another. For now, all Rainbow Dash could do was wait.
Only a few minutes, she said. Wait right here, she said. It'll be fun, she said.
Rainbow snorted to herself while anxiously pacing back and forth. She glanced at the grandfather clock of the small lounge she had slinked off to after the 10-minute mark. At least now, she had comfy chairs to sit in, and the office was just down the hall. She'd be able to hear Celestia opening the door, so it shouldn't pose any problems. It had been 30 minutes, though, and Rainbow was getting more than a little antsy.
What are they talking about?
She groaned in frustration before looking around the room. There were numerous chairs, a few couches, a love seat in one corner, numerous coffee tables and desks, a few lamps, and plenty of bookshelves, each one filled with books. Rainbow had made a little mental game of taking the first letter of each word from the titles of 2 or 3 books and then come up with some cool-sounding acronym. With a grunt, she decided one more round couldn't hurt. She began to scan the shelves when her ears perked up. She could hear High Blood's voice coming from his office, and he was speaking more loudly and clearly than before. Now with curiosity burning in her mind, Rainbow slowly trotted to the door and put her ear to it.
If I may be so bold, Princess, why her? You've told me her story, but that doesn't explain why.
High Blood asked, sounding slightly frustrated.
And I already told you why. She needed a home, High Blood, and I was more than happy to provide one.
Celestia answered calmly. Rainbow could practically feel a tension in the air.
With all due respect, Your Highness, I don't buy that at all. We've had enough of these meetings on account of my son that I know you better than many of the other nobles do, High Blood pointed out. And the Celestia I know wouldn't have decided to adopt some unknown filly of no status unless there was a very good reason. What you're telling me may be morally correct, but you are the ruler of this country, Princess. I know you have to think more practically than that.
Do not think, even for a moment, that I disregarded the morals I swore to myself when I assumed the throne, High Blood.
That's not what I'm implying, Celestia. You know that. I just know you. And I know you're hiding something. I merely wish to know what that is.
Rainbow frowned and looked at the door quizzically before pressing her ear closer.
Nothing gets past you, High Blood.
Celestia chuckled in amusement.
But, alas, this is not something I can easily tell others. I must ask you simply to trust me.
I trust you with my life, Your Majesty. I just can't help but sometimes wonder why. You hide so much, even if it's for our own good most days.
Rainbow took her ear away from the door.
What?
She looked at the door again before turning her attention to a nearby window. Acting on a hunch, she flooded up and peered out onto the streets below.
Okay. Yeah, I knew it. Twilight's house is right there.
She remembered then that Twilight was apparently spending the night at home with her parents.
Might as well see what she knows.
Rainbow carefully slid the window open and then shot across the street, leaving a prismatic trail in her wake. I got it, honey. Nightlight called out to Twilight Velvet when he heard the sound of some pony knocking on his front door. He slid off of his seat and trotted into the entry hall. It was decorated in deep blue, subtle gray, and numerous shades of purple. He paused only briefly to give Twilight Sparkle, who was currently seated in one of the seats in the room, a proud smile. He then pulled open the door and looked out. "Hello, what can I—" Huh?
Down here, dude.
Nightlight looked down and came close to fainting when he realized it was Rainbow Dash standing in front of him. "Whoa! Your Highness,
Don't call me that! May I come in?"
Rainbow cut him off firmly before putting on a somewhat more friendly expression. Nightlight's mind took a moment to catch up. He shook himself and then nodded. "Oh, of course. Come on in. Make yourself at home."
Thanks. Hey, Twilight, you in here?
Rainbow called as she stepped into the building, looking around curiously. The color scheme was wildly different from that of Highblood's manor.
Rainbow?
Twilight looked up from her book, From Salt Shaker to Teacup, A Beginner's Guide to Transfiguration Principles and Spells, and blinked in surprise.
What are you doing here? I thought you were at Highblood's place. I was, and I wasn't supposed to leave yet. I kinda gotta ask you something, though. I think it's important.
Rainbow explained before glancing at Nightlight and the newly arrived Twilight Velvet.
Anywhere we can talk in private?
Twilight blinked again while her ears twitched in confusion.
Sure, I guess.
She slipped off of her couch and looked to Velvet with an equally confused expression on both of their faces.
Princess Rainbow Dash and I— Rainbow Dash is just fine, Twilight. Rainbow Dash and I are gonna be upstairs for a minute.
Twilight looked at Rainbow again with a scrutinizing gaze before leading her out of the room and up a flight of stairs. At the end of the following hall, Twilight opened a door that led into her room. It was softly colored in deep blues and dark purples, most of the illumination coming from small lamps or candlesticks. Rainbow had to admit, it was easier on the eyes than the other rooms.
Probably easier to read in. Okay, now that we're here, what's going on?
Twilight asked, turning to Rainbow and gazing at her intently.
Okay, you know Princess Celestia pretty well, right? You spent a lot of time together, so...
Rainbow asked awkwardly, one of her forelegs making wide gestures that ultimately meant nothing.
I think? She's over 1,000 years old, Rainbow Dash. I doubt I could get to know her very well unless I had a comparable frame of reference. Whatever. My question is, well, how much like her is it for her to, adopt me?
Rainbow asked, looking at Twilight as she recoiled in alarm.
Like, is it something she would normally do? If so, what would her reasons be? I don't...
Twilight stuttered before sitting down on her haunches and rubbing her face.
I don't know. I mean, she can be vague, cryptic and all that, but I really don't know how to answer that. Well, Prince Highblood and Celestia were chit-chatting and I overheard them talking about me. Highblood doesn't seem to think it's normal of Celestia at all to adopt me, and she even went so far as to admit that she was hiding something. She just didn't elaborate on what.
Twilight's ears fell flat against her head.
The princess is...
A knocking came to her bedroom door, interrupting her. Only a moment later, it was opened to reveal Twilight Velvet and Princess Celestia on the other side. Rainbow instantly shrunk away, as did Twilight. Celestia looked at them both disapprovingly, though not harshly.
You know, Rainbow Dash, if you were bored, you could have just knocked.
Sensing an out, Rainbow shrugged.
I've only been here for a few weeks, and it sounded like you two were having an important chat. I didn't want to interrupt or anything.
Celestia smiled knowingly.
Well, your timing was rather poor. Pretty much as soon as you left, I opened the door to let you in.
Oh. Meh.
Rainbow face-huffed in exasperation.
Come then. Prince Highblood is waiting for you.
Celestia said before nodding to Twilight with a warm smile.
Have a good day now, my faithful student.
Twilight nodded and waved uneasily, an enormously fake grin remaining plastered on her face until both Rainbow and Celestia were out of sight. Once they were gone, she slumped to the ground and groaned.
boy.